It's time to be adult Goonies. The Uncharted games have always had a polyamorous relationship with adventure. If one's fun, hey, maybe two's better, maybe three, maybe four. Sony must have agreed, packaging up Lost Legacy and Uncharted 4 into the Thieves collection, remastered now for the PlayStation 5. So strap on them ankles of pure adamantium and rib cages that probably look like a friggin' fractal pattern from all the bone-breaking leaps, and we're gonna head out into adventure. The first 2,000 people who like and subscribe will be able to add their numbers to the tally of the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to see more about all of these guys' adventures, you can check out the Walking the Walk I did on Uncharted 4. The link will be in the description as well as up in the cards. Graphics are up first. Uncharted Lost Legacy and, well, both of them look absolutely incredible. They do look like remasters, though. I want to make sure that's clear. The collection's graphical upgrades include a 60 FPS mode, a performance mode at 120, and a high fidelity mode, which is 30 FPS and high res at 4K. And the same can be said for Uncharted 4. Now, I played around, and while 60 dropped a couple of times, the trade-off to 30 actually wasn't worth it for the sharper picture to me. If you're thinking of jumping around between these, I would say start at 30 and play it for a little bit, then go to 60 and 120, because at some point, you are definitely going to notice that 60 just feels a good deal smoother. One thing I came away from after playing these games, though, is how good they originally looked. So much so that while the frame rate boost is appreciated, it's not exactly a knock it out of the park look for everything compared to their predecessors. They already looked incredible. Rose-tinted glasses, maybe? Not really, because I actually just recently played those. And the one thing that I came away from while playing this was it was the animations that sell so well. The character models, maybe they don't have the exact same level of detail of something that just came out, but it's looking out over the jungle, leaping into your Jeep, and then spending a couple minutes just playing in the mud and water, or watching how the various different characters engage with rope in the game, which sounds really weird, but once you first do it, you're just going to look at it and be like, damn, that is impressive. Things that other games just can't get right. And other than a wonky ledge jump animation that you'll definitely see on the NPCs at times where they absolutely break gravity, overall, this is one of the highest presentation games you'll see switching between gameplay and cutscenes pretty much ever. Maybe The Last of Us would be equal, but it's certainly not nearly as bombastic. And I say bombastic for a reason. The past Uncharted games, they're no strangers to team-ups, but Lost Legacy itself firmly establishes that two may actually be better than one, especially when the two are involved in combat, which is slicker versus Uncharted 4. The ability to punch, the ability to get out of grapples and holds is the same across both games. But in Lost Legacy in particular, Nadine and Chloe just have this synergy to them that when you're in battles and they're leaping over and doing various things, it feels actually better than Uncharted 4, which was released, 1 year prior to that, I think. But there's this visual onomatopoeia that Uncharted has always had, that Bob Ross moment of these happy little accidents turning into masterpiece moments. And everybody, probably developers too, are left scratching their head wondering, how exactly did this all come together? When comparing the two, Uncharted Lost Legacy, it may not have exactly the chops for long vistas that some places in Uncharted 4 have, but I felt that there was a step up a little bit in some of the details on the characters. Maybe it's just the way the scenes were played out, but something about it looks a little bit newer, which makes sense because it was released slightly afterwards. Refreshingly speedy on animation is another thing. Yes, it has its slow animations at times, but if you played Red Dead Redemption 2, you could make a friggin' sandwich as he skinned a deer. But Uncharted, even when Nate's hurt, he gets up hurt. Or when Chloe takes a bad fall, probably collapsing, an entire rib cage worth of bones, she gets up begrudgingly and then shakes herself off, and that slow injury movement fading back into the normal movement of the character works so well. It gives you this feeling of almost claustrophobia when it comes to an injury on your character, because even though you might not be under gunfire at that time, you can't move as fast as you normally could as they sort of walk that pain away. You can see them wincing in pain as they slam into a ledge or fall through 1,000 corrugated roofs. The level of polish, though, is off the charts. The adjustments here do result in a nice clear picture, but like I said, 30 FPS just doesn't hold up to 60. You can turn that thing on 60, it still looks amazing, and play it with a lot more responsiveness in your gameplay.
Crap. This is really not good.
Yeah, I've had worse nights, believe me.
It's messed up.
That's family.
Yeah, your little TV game thing. I bet I can beat your high score.
You think that you can beat my high score on my TV game thing?
Yeah, I think you're scared now.
You don't even know what it's called.
I don't need to know what it's called. I've seen you play. It's
Right.
jumping and running, and I have a natural talent for that.
Especially with big budget titles, you're always expecting them to hold up their end on the audio section, and these guys did. It has a couple small flaws here and there, but overall, this is top-notch, top-tier voice acting and music. Emily Rose nails it for her time on the screen, as does Claudia Black as Chloe, Laura Bailey as Nadine, Richard McGonigal, I think, as Solly, and of course, Nolan North and Troy Baker as the two leads in Uncharted 4, and one of them in Uncharted Lost Legacy. While I was impressed with the audio in Uncharted originally, we do get a good idea of what Tempest 3D might be able to accomplish here. For moments where enemies fall off ledges screaming past you, or gun acoustics slowly fade or transform as you fire your rifle down a stairwell into some ancient king's tomb and then turn around and fire it into the wide open, you do hear that a bit more discreetly here. And while there have been some issues here and there with particular gun sounds and that kind of stuff that we've seen in the Uncharted games, overall, it just works. It sounds great. I like the audio presentation here, and I gotta shout out a special bit to the music. We always get in this argument, should music add to? What if it's not there playing? How does music actually lend itself to a video game? And everybody's got a different answer. I gotta say, if the music wasn't playing in some of these poignant points that happen in this game, it would be a lesser game for it. The soundtrack is amazing, but I like it even more than I thought I liked it when I played the original Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy. I could go out there and make 2 videos, one for each of these. I figure if I'm clear enough, I can describe to you what I'm talking about with both, and you don't have to sit there and watch 2 videos and, just fluff my numbers. Let's start with Uncharted 4 first. So if you haven't played any Uncharted, Uncharted 4 has you as Nathan Drake in his last big adventure for him and his team as you go out and try to find one last hidden artifact out in a world that frankly is pretty plumbed for data when it comes to it. I mean, where are all these hidden cities and pirate caches, unless you're talking about like the bottom of the Marianas Trench? But it still happens. Uncharted 4 starts very strong, though, in a different way. After a bit of a prelude of action, you see Nate move forward in time, and you can feel instantly this amazing claustrophobic feeling that is presented to you via just the animation and the graphics on the screen. This feeling of his home as he looks out the window into suburbia staring back at him. It's the one last tomb that dude can't seem to crack. Even the moment a dog walker rolls by after you get done playing with your Nerf gun in the attic, it's the child who has to go downstairs and stop playing so that he can eat. And you can sense that return to the real world and almost an unease in him. But unlike Harrison Ford, that keeps trying to make movies despite brittle bone syndrome, Nathan and others get themselves wrapped up in some trouble once again. You need to shoot, scoot, stab, and sneak around through a bevy of bad guys before he can finally put to bed this legacy that he's got of the best adventurer in the world and consistently keep his brother Sam at his side as well. It's a mixture between story, platforming, and action fare in a third-person view if you haven't played this before. Nathan and his brother are constantly finding locations where they need to go explore on their quest and solve puzzles, as well as a bunch of platforming. Now, any good story has its bad guys, and here Nathan and Sam go up against an enemy and their forces that throw pretty much everything at them. There's a lot of gunplay in this game. Nathan can rough and tumble it with the best of them when it comes to fighting, but usually he's going to find himself getting grabbed and slapped around after a bit. But put a gun in his hands, and this dude is pretty quickly going to whittle down the enemy forces. The cover system in the game support that. They reinforce it. It's pretty useful to stick behind both indestructible and destructible parts of the world, even if it's just for a moment. And the ability to blind fire across the gap to enemies or pop out when they need adds to that action feel. You don't always need to aim just perfectly. And of course, there's various options that allow for you to change that. As that story continues to progress, so does Nathan's and Sam's story until the very end. Now, when it comes to Lost Legacy's story, Chloe and Nadine, and this adventure is basically concurrent with some of what goes on in the Uncharted games, they find trouble right away as Chloe's off looking for another artifact and doesn't want to bring Nathan out of retirement into it. The adventure is this excellent bit of side telling of a story that's wrapped around Uncharted 4 at times, but you don't need experience with Uncharted 4, you just need to know a couple of these facts. Nadine and Chloe have an instantly noticeable difference in their chemistry and their partnership that I liked too. Chloe's trying to consistently prove to those around her she isn't Sam, she isn't Nathan, she's her own adventurer with a code of ethics that, for all intents and purposes, sort of strip Nathan's down to something a bit more ugly if you track it. It's a great play on the experience of these two teams. Chloe and Nadine argue and fight, but there's something very lively about Chloe as a character. She wasn't pulled into the adventure one last time like Nathan in Uncharted 4. She still has the edge of optimism to her that hasn't really dulled yet and just means Lost Legacy, Thelma and Louise's craziness lasts throughout the entire game. that camaraderie for these two characters, these friendships, these gals from another pal, does get strained heavily at some times, but there's just something about it that I really enjoyed. And the one thing both these games share is that combined chemistry of platforming, shooting, and adventure. Just like the original Uncharted games, they control pretty much exactly the same. They have safeguards in place that let you be the action star without splatting 1,000 feet into a pile of rocks. Use a button press or a hold to do swinging and jumping, and that means that you're stuck on a crevasse or a crag somewhere. You don't have to worry about looking and leaping. And while the game does give you more moves later on, it does so always tied to adventurers' items that you grab within the game world, which I like. It really doesn't matter how you play these games. In the end, you're going to be either knocking people out completely or you're going to be shooting them. You're always going to be doing some puzzles and some platforming. Now, Uncharted's around 15 hours, where Lost Legacy itself takes about 8. And while you're going through both, you're going to be able to unlock different things like your skins for the different characters. You'll see a skin on mine. You'll also be able to unlock weapons, that kind of stuff. One thing to remember is that PS4 save games and trophies do transfer to this version. And I'm going to talk about the versions at the end with the rating. But before the rating, we have to talk about the fun factor. I've always felt Nathan, he's rapscallion. Those ways for him, especially at the starting, are a bit dulled, and it takes a while for him to build back up in Uncharted 4. And the developers show that with animations as well as a ton of dialogue between Nathan and, well, everyone else in the game world. As sort of a celebration of that old horse that's just going out for one last run before he goes to a farm somewhere to sex his life away. But as the adventure goes on, it switches between that and his own resolve as it crumbles, especially face on into adventure. Nathan doesn't really know any other way to get around things or do things other than shooting and then asking questions later. And you can sense that he knows this is both his last and probably greatest adventure, The Last Crusade. There's a lot of that camaraderie that you see as the aging characters sort of level out and the people replace them. Where Lost Legacy feels a bit like the original Indiana Jones, the fun here, though, is being able to just leap around, testing overworked fingers to see if they'll snap off as you grab a crumbling cliff on the other side of a jump you just don't think anybody can take. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system. When you look at these, if you haven't played them, for sure, you should definitely jump in. Do you need to know 1, 2, and 3? It'd be great because you would understand the camaraderie, the chemistry between these characters. It's not really going to be something that throws a person off. I would say get this game. It's awesome. Or games. However, their upgrade system is a puzzle, so you're going to have to listen to this. Uncharted 4 A Thief's End, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, or Uncharted 4 A Thief's End and Lost Legacy. If you had those for PS4, you have the option to pay $10 to get the upgrade to the digital version. This upgrade will grant that entire bundle, even if you own one. That's what I'm reading, at least. You will want to check that out. If it doesn't, it's still worth it price-wise. I want to make sure that's clear. And you can correct me in the comments because it was a little bit fuzzy on that. Unfortunately, the upgrade doesn't apply if you got Uncharted 4 through the PlayStation Plus. And I think this has happened before with Sony owners, where they get a title in PlayStation Plus and they can't get the next one for $10. So just be aware of that. Regardless if you have to buy both for $10 or if you just decide to buy the entire bundle as a start over for your PS5, if you're lucky enough to have one. These games are amazing, guys. This was one of the few times where I've gone back and played a remaster, and I've just been stunned at some of the scenery that these guys have put together and how fun the gameplay is. It's got issues, for sure. This thing is just a blast to play and one of the most scenic, awesome adventures that are really available on any console. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you get a chance, check out Twitter, check out our Facebook. Patrons, if you get a chance, make sure to jump in once a week, or actually once every day, during the week, and we do the gaming news sort of just discussion in the early morning. If you're not a patron, that's where we're doing that right now. It works really well. Everybody jumps in, talks about the morning news, and decides things. It's a very cool place to have a nice, awesome conversation. And it's also a cool place for various other reasons. So if you get a chance, check out the Patreon. If you don't, I'm going to tell you right now, gaming's getting good. February is rolling up on us, and there's a lot of big titles. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.